Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to Predatory Exotics. So today we have got another episode of our new series that we are doing on a Monday about different sized tanks and what different species you can put in them. So as we move up in different sized tanks in our series, we move on to the mini tall terrarium. I've got an Exoterra here and a Zoomed here. These both measure 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters as the base, and then 45 centimeters high. In inches, that's a 12-inch by 12-inch base and an 18-inch height. So now that you know the dimensions of the tank, we're going to talk about some of the different species that you can put into them. This isn't an exclusive list of every single species that you could possibly keep in here. These are just some of the ones that we found, some of the favourites, and some of the ones that we're thinking about putting in the future. But by no means is this a conclusive list of every single species you can put inside them. Before we get started on what species we're going to put inside each one, if you want to know the difference between the Zoomed and the Exoterra terrarium, go check out this video here. It is our most popular video. Go check it out and you can see all the differences before you decide which one you're going to buy. So without further ado, let's get into all the different species that you can keep inside these tanks. So it is going to be similar to the last video where we did the 30-30-30 cube. Obviously this one just gives you a little bit more height, so you can keep some of the same species, but it does allow you for them arboreal species. So we won't cover every single one we covered in the last video. We'll give you the ones that might be a little bit better adapted to the taller terrarium. So we're going to start this list off with your invertebrates and what sort of invertebrates you can keep inside these terrariums. We have used these terrariums in the past for stick insects. We used to keep Indian stick insects, which are very cool. They're easy for kids, an easy starter species to get you into the invertebrate hobby. Or my personal favourite stick insect is actually the Sungaya stick insect. So these are a nice black and white colour. They're very good camouflage. They're just one of my personal favourite species. And along the similar lines of stick insects, you can keep your mantises in here. You can keep a lot of the larger mantis species. Your Asian giant mantises, the Congo giant mantis that we have will eventually grow up and be in one of these enclosures. As long as your stick insect or mantis isn't above 15 centimeters, as you need to allow the 3 times height so they can have good molts and be nice and healthy. Sticking with the creepy crawlies and such is the whip scorpion, which is one of Ollie's personal favourites. You can get the smaller whip scorpion species in this enclosure and they'll do nicely with a cork bark setup. They'll be very nice in here. And your arboreal tarantula species. There's loads of different ones to choose from, depending on what sort of thing you're after. It's mostly old world tarantulas if you want arboreal ones. So you will have to make sure you're the right level of keeper if you want to keep an arboreal old world tarantula. So moving on from your invertebrates, let's get into the different amphibians that you can keep inside these tanks. A great species to keep inside these tanks are your different species of dart frog. The thumbnail dart frogs are really cool. You've got your blue jean dart frogs, stuff like that. They're very small, so you can keep 3 or 4 inside an enclosure this big. Or if you want to step it up and get a little bit larger of a dart frog, but not too big, you can get the Dendrobates leucomelis or the bumblebee dart frogs. You could keep a couple in a tank this size. They do very nicely. I've kept them in the past in a slightly bigger enclosure as I had a bigger colony, but they're a great little dart frog and a great display species. So if we talk about some of the slightly more unique species of frog that you can get inside this enclosure, you can get your reed frogs. You can do these with a full water bottom setup, a bit like the reeds in where they naturally live. They're a very cool frog and there's a few different species to choose from with a variety of different colours. Alternatively, you could go for the glass frog. These are a see-through frog, which are really cool. They stay nice and small, so you can get a couple in a tank this size. And then another 2 species of a similar size. You've got your clown frog and your giraffe frog. They're very similar colours, they've just got a slightly different pattern. They're very cool frogs and something we'd like to look into keeping in the future. So I hope that's given you a few ideas for your amphibians. We'll move on to your reptiles. If we start off with a quick note about snakes, there's not really a lot you can keep. Like we said in the 30-30-30 video, your baby hognose and baby sandbar would go well in this size tank, but this wasted height wouldn't really be any use to them. You could keep any of your other baby snakes, but no adult snakes would fit in an enclosure this size. And we'll move on to the biggest section in this video, which will be all your different geckos and lizards that you can get in here. A lot of the micro geckos and dwarf geckos will fit in here, especially some of the dwarf arboreal species can get in here. So we'll cover quite a few in this section of the video. So if we start talking about day geckos, There's tons of different species that you can get. Obviously bigger species like the Madagascar giant day gecko won't fit in here, and some of its closer relatives, but some of the dwarf species can fit in an enclosure this size. You've got species such as the neon day gecko, the line day gecko, the peacock day gecko, gold dust day gecko, and then my personal favourite, which is a little bit more expensive, is the electric blue day gecko. These are a fantastic little species. You could keep a pair. Obviously the male is the bright blue one and the female is the sort of brown one. So you keep a nice pair in here and hopefully you'd get them to breed. Another couple of dwarf arboreal species are the Cameroon dwarf gecko. These have stunning yellow and blue colours, fantastic species that we'd like to keep in the future. As well as the yellow-headed gecko. They're a slightly more plain colour. Obviously they're brown with the yellow head. Not sure if that's something we'd look into, but another great species to keep in these enclosures. So some of the cooler, lesser known species that you could keep inside this enclosure would be the Bowers chameleon gecko. These are a great species, really underappreciated in the reptile hobby. They are a little bit more expensive, but they are super cool. They almost look like a mini chameleon, that's why it's the chameleon gecko. Other species include the golden-tailed gecko. These are super cool species from Australia, vary in colour and pattern quite a lot. They're again a little bit more expensive, but a great species to keep. And if you'd like a nice tropical setup, the Malaysian cat gecko is a really unique species and you might only get one inside this tank, but it would be a great fit. So we'll quickly cover some of the different geckos that you could get in this tank as well as the 30-30-30. They might be a little bit more suited to this one as they have more arboreal space to climb and they will climb if given the opportunity. So the mourning gecko is a great parthenogenic species that we've mentioned quite a few times in this series already. You could get a nice sized colony of 4 or 5 mourning geckos inside here, and as they're parthenogenic you don't need males, they're all female and they'll breed for you and you can expand your colony. The bino gecko is another parthenogenic species, but this one's from Australia, so you can keep it in a more arid setup. These are a great species that we'd like to keep. We think they're really unique and we'd love to breed them as you don't need a male. The Madagascar clawless gecko is a really cool species, really unique sort of thin-bodied gecko that we'd like to keep, as well as some of the Paraidura species that are a little bit smaller, such as the Bastardi, Vizimba and Androiensis. As well as these dwarf gecko species, you can also keep some of your favourites, such as the crested gecko, gargoyle gecko and mossy gecko. These would be great baby or raise up tanks, but you will need to upgrade them in the future to some of the larger tanks we'll cover later on in this series. So I hope this video has given you a few different ideas of what you could put inside your tank if you do have a 30-30-45, or if you have a space that you can only fit this size tank in. I know it is quite a lot of gecko heavy stuff on this sort of tank size, but personally I think some of the dwarf and micro gecko species are some of the best you can keep. They're really active and a great display species if you do choose to keep them. So if you have enjoyed this video and it's given you some tips on what you can keep inside your tank, please leave a like, comment down below what you want to keep in this tank or what you do keep in this tank. Don't forget to subscribe to Predatory Exotics, as well as going over to Instagram and following us as we've just hit 1,000. I hope you're enjoying this series, so make sure you check it out, as well as the podcast and our Friday feature video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.